What happens when a three-star admiral refuses to sit at a retirement ceremony and 200 people wait in silence to find out who's missing? The answer would change everything they thought they knew about courage. Naval Base San Diego, California, November 2024. The afternoon sun cut through the windows of the base auditorium, illuminating rows of dress uniforms in blues and whites. Ribbons and medals gleamed under the overhead lights. 200 attendees filled every seat. Officers, enlisted personnel, families, everyone positioned according to rank and protocol, the way the Navy had done things for 2 centuries. This was a retirement ceremony for Admiral William Garrett, Vice Admiral, 3 stars, 58 years old, silver hair cut to regulation, a career of distinguished service etched into every line of his face. The kind of officer men followed into fire because they trusted his judgment more than their own fear. The ceremony was scheduled for 1400 hours, 2 o'clock sharp. In the Navy, you didn't start late. You didn't start early. You started on time because discipline began with respecting the clock. Commander Margaret Sullivan stood near the stage, tablet in hand, running through her mental checklist for the 50th time. 42 years old, efficient in the way career officers become when they've coordinated so many events that protocol becomes muscle memory. She'd organized over 100 ceremonies in her 15 years as a staff officer. Retirements, promotions, change of command. This one should have been simple, straightforward. An admiral with 36 years of service stepping down with full honors. But nothing about today would be simple. At 13:55, Admiral Garrett entered through the rear doors. He wore dress whites, immaculate, every crease sharp enough to draw blood. His chest was covered with ribbons earned across 3 decades. Navy Cross, Defense Superior Service Medal, Bronze Star with Valor, Legion of Merit. The fruit salad of a warrior who'd spent his life in places where the shooting was real and the consequences permanent. Sullivan straightened, tablet ready. The room noticed his entrance. 200 people came to attention in spirit, if not in posture. Respect for rank, respect for the man. Respect for what those 3 stars represented. Garrett walked down the center aisle. His steps were measured, deliberate, eyes forward. He reached the front row where a reserve seat waited for him, second from the left. A small placard with his name in printed letters, Admiral William Garrett. The seat of honor for the man being celebrated. He stood beside it, hands at his sides, perfectly still, and he didn't sit. Sullivan watched, confusion flickering across her professional composure. The admiral was supposed to sit. That was the protocol. Senior officer takes his seat, ceremony officer gives the signal, the program begins. Simple, predictable, the way it had always been done. But Garrett remained standing. Sullivan approached, keeping her voice low and respectful. Admiral Garrett, sir, we're ready to begin. Please be seated. Garrett's eyes swept across the auditorium. Front row, second row, third row, all the way to the back wall where junior enlisted personnel stood because they'd run out of chairs. He was looking for something. Someone. Admiral? Sullivan tried again, a note of concern creeping into her tone. We don't start yet, Garrett said. His voice was quiet but carried the weight of absolute certainty. The voice of a man who'd given orders under fire and expected them to be followed because lives depended on it. Sullivan glanced at her watch. 13:57. 3 minutes to scheduled start. Sir, everyone is seated. All invited guests are present. We're ready to proceed on schedule. Not everyone is seated, Garrett said. Sullivan looked around the auditorium. Every seat was occupied. People were standing against the walls because there wasn't room for more chairs. The fire marshal had already made her remove 10 seats to maintain code compliance. Sir, I don't understand. Everyone on the guest list is here. We're at capacity. No. Garrett's tone didn't rise, didn't sharpen, but somehow became more immovable. Someone is missing. We don't begin until she arrives. She, Sullivan's confusion deepened. She scanned her guest list on the tablet, cross-referencing with the seating chart. Every name checked off, every position filled. The room was starting to notice now, whispers spreading like ripples across water. 200 people watching the Admiral stand while everyone else sat. The guest of honor refusing to take his seat, refusing to let his own retirement ceremony begin. Captain James Burton stood on stage, the chaplain beside him, both men exchanging glances of bewilderment. Burton was here to give remarks about Garrett's career. The chaplain would offer invocation and benediction. Everything was prepared. Everything was ready. Except the man they were honoring wouldn't sit down. Sullivan leaned closer to Garrett, dropping her voice to barely above a whisper. "Admiral, who are we waiting for?" "Captain Eleanor Crawford." Sullivan's fingers flew across her tablet, pulling up the guest list, searching for that name. Nothing. She checked the seating chart. Empty. She verified the RSVP responses. No Crawford. "Sir, I don't have a Captain Eleanor Crawford on the guest list." "Then your list is wrong." The words hung in the air between them. Not accusatory, just factual. The kind of statement that left no room for negotiation. "Sir," Sullivan said, trying to keep her professional composure intact. "If Captain Crawford was supposed to attend, I apologize for the oversight. But perhaps we could begin the ceremony and she could join when she arrives?" "No." Garrett's eyes were still scanning the room, still searching. "We don't start without Captain Crawford." The silence in the auditorium had become heavy, uncomfortable. 200 people shifting in their seats, checking watches, trying to understand what they were witnessing. A three-star admiral holding up his own retirement ceremony. For someone who wasn't even on the guest list, this had never happened before. Not in Sullivan's 15 years coordinating ceremonies. Not in the institutional memory of anyone present. Sullivan made a decision. She signaled to Lieutenant Marcus Reed, a junior officer standing near the side door. 26 years old, eager to prove himself. The kind of young officer who volunteered for every extra duty because he understood that careers were built on being reliable. Reed approached quickly. "Ma'am?" "Find Captain Eleanor Crawford," Sullivan said quietly. "Check the parking lot. Check the lobby. Check her duty station if you have to." "Ma'am, what does she look like?" Sullivan glanced at Garrett, then back to Reed. "I don't know. Just find an officer named Captain Eleanor Crawford and bring her here immediately." Reed nodded and left at double time. 1,400 hours came and went. The ceremony was officially late now. The chaplain on stage shifted his weight. Captain Burton looked down at his prepared remarks, then at the audience, then back at his notes, trying to make sense of what was happening. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Garrett stood at attention, hands behind his back, perfectly still, not fidgeting, not explaining, not offering any justification to the 200 people watching him. Just waiting with the patience of a man who'd learned long ago that some things were worth waiting for, no matter who was watching. The silence was becoming painful. Officers in the audience exchanged glances. Family members whispered to each other, everyone trying to solve the mystery. Who was Captain Eleanor Crawford? Why would Admiral Garrett refuse to start his own retirement ceremony without her? Rear Admiral Victoria Ashford sat in the front row, 3 seats down from where Garrett stood. 54 years old, sharp-featured, wearing her own impressive array of ribbons. She leaned toward the officer beside her and whispered something. The officer shrugged. Nobody knew. At 14:12, the rear doors of the auditorium opened. Lieutenant Reed appeared. Behind him walked a woman in navy dress whites, Captain Eleanor Crawford. She stopped just inside the door. 28 years old, athletic build, the kind of fitness that came from discipline rather than vanity. Dark brown hair pulled back in a regulation bun. Blue eyes that carried something old behind them, something that didn't match her young face. Her uniform was immaculate. Her ribbons included a bronze star and a purple heart, positioned among others that spoke of combat service and commendation. She looked terrified. 200 pairs of eyes turned toward her. The weight of that attention was visible in the way her shoulders tensed, the way her hands wanted to move but didn't. She saw the crowd, saw the senior officers, saw Admiral Garrett standing at the front. Her first instinct was to leave, to back out of the room and disappear. She didn't belong here. This was Admiral Garrett's ceremony, his moment, his honor. She was just a captain, just an intelligence officer, just someone who worked in the background, analyzing data and writing reports that other people acted on. But Garrett had seen her. For the first time since entering the auditorium, his expression changed. The stern watchfulness softened. He smiled. A genuine smile, the kind that transformed his face from intimidating admiral to someone who actually felt joy. He crossed the auditorium. Every eye in the room followed him. 200 people tracking his movement as he walked past rows of seated officers, past the ceremony staff, past protocol and procedure, straight to the young captain standing frozen by the door. Elle stood rooted to the floor. Her mind was racing, trying to understand, trying to process why she was here, why Lieutenant Reed had pulled her from the intelligence center with urgent instructions, why Admiral Garrett was walking toward her with purpose in every step. "Sir," she said, her voice barely steady, "I think there's been a mistake. I was just finishing my shift analysis and—" Garrett came to attention. Right there, in front of her, in front of 200 witnesses. He raised his right hand in a salute, sharp, crisp, perfect. The kind of salute that conveyed respect across every inch of its execution. Elle's mouth opened, closed. Her hands trembled at her sides. "Captain Eleanor Crawford," Garrett said, his voice carrying through the silent auditorium. "United States Navy, Bronze Star recipient, Purple Heart recipient, one of the finest officers I have ever had the privilege to know." The room erupted, not in sound, but in shock. Gasps, whispers, heads turning to neighbors, eyes wide with confusion and disbelief. A 3-star admiral saluting a 28-year-old captain, publicly, in front of senior officers who outranked her by decades. Elle's hands came up automatically, muscle memory from 8 years of service. She returned the salute. Her form wasn't as crisp as Garrett's. Her hands shook slightly, but the motion was there, the respect, the training that lived in her bones. Garrett dropped his salute, extended his hand. Elle took it. His grip was firm, steady, grounding her when everything else felt like it was tilting sideways. "Admiral Garrett," she said, her voice rough from the effort of keeping emotions in check. "Sir, what's happening? Why am I here?" "Because this ceremony doesn't start without you," Garrett said simply. It never was going to. The room was completely silent now. 200 people trying to understand what they were witnessing. An admiral calling a young captain essential to his retirement ceremony, giving her a place of honor, refusing to proceed without her presence. Admiral Ashford, seated in the front row, leaned forward slightly. Her expression was unreadable, skeptical perhaps, calculating. Who was this young woman who commanded such attention from a 3-star admiral? Lieutenant Colonel Harrison Blake sat 5 rows back, 45 years old, Marine Corps, attached to the Navy installation as a liaison officer. He recognized Crawford's name, knew her reputation in intelligence circles. But this public display from Admiral Garrett, that was unexpected. Garrett kept his hand on Elle's shoulder, a gesture that was both protective and proprietary, claiming her presence in this space, making clear to everyone watching that she belonged here, whether they understood why or not. "Sir," Elle tried again, her voice dropping to a whisper meant only for him. "This is your day, your retirement. I'm nobody. I don't deserve to be—" "You deserve to be exactly where I say you deserve to be," Garrett interrupted gently. "And right now, That's at the front of this room. He turned to address the auditorium, his voice rising to command volume. Most of you don't know Captain Crawford. That's a failure on my part, a failure I'm correcting right now. Elle wanted to disappear, wanted to sink through the floor. 200 faces staring at her. Senior officers she'd only seen from a distance. People whose names carried weight in history. And here she was, standing next to a 3-star admiral who was making her the center of attention at his own retirement ceremony. Captain Crawford, Garrett said, still addressing the room, has a story that needs to be told, a story I've kept quiet for too long. Because I was protecting her privacy, protecting her ability to serve without the weight of history crushing her before she had the chance to prove herself. Elle's heart was pounding. She knew what was coming, knew that the carefully guarded privacy she'd maintained for 9 years was about to shatter, knew that the person she'd worked so hard to become was about to be eclipsed by the person she'd been. 9 years ago, Garrett said, and the room leaned forward, hungry for explanation. Eleanor Crawford was 19 years old. She was a single mother with an infant daughter. No college degree, no military experience, no connections or advantages. The whispers started immediately, rippling through the audience like wind through grass. She worked in the cafeteria, Garrett continued, right here on this base, serving meals, wiping tables, cleaning trays, the kind of work most of you never notice because the people doing it are invisible. Necessary, but invisible. Elle felt her face burning, felt the weight of judgment settling over her like a blanket. She could imagine what they were thinking. Cafeteria worker, single mother at 19, every stereotype clicking into place, every assumption forming. Admiral Ashford's expression had shifted from skeptical to something harder, disapproving. A cafeteria worker who somehow became a decorated naval officer? The implications were clear in her narrowed eyes. But Garrett wasn't finished. I watched her every single day for months, not randomly, not by accident. I was looking for her specifically, searching for her, because I owed someone a debt. He paused. Let the silence build. Let the audience wonder. Her father was Master Chief Robert Crawford, United States Marine Corps, 20 years of service, 3 combat deployments, a warrior in every sense of the word. The room shifted again, understanding beginning to dawn in some faces. Military families recognize the pattern, the legacy, the weight of following in a parent's footsteps. In 2006, Garrett said, and his voice dropped half a register, took on the weight of memory. Master Chief Crawford and I served together in Iraq, Fallujah. I was a lieutenant commander. He was the most experienced NCO in our unit. Elle closed her eyes. She'd heard this story, pieces of it, from her mother, from her father's Marine Corps friends who visited in the years after. But never from Admiral Garrett, never from the man who'd been there. We were running convoy security, Garrett said. Route clearance through the city, standard operation, except nothing in Fallujah was ever standard. We got hit, RPG ambush. 3 insurgents with launchers positioned on rooftops. Coordinated attack. Professional. The room was absolutely silent. Even the whispers had stopped. Everyone understood what was coming. The shape of sacrifice that defines so many military families. The first RPG missed our lead vehicle by inches, Garrett said. The second hit our rear truck. Direct hit. Killed 2 Marines instantly. Lance Corporal Rodriguez and Private First Class Williams, both 20 years old. The specific names made it real, made it personal. Not just statistics, not just casualties, real men with real names who died in real fire. The third RPG was aimed at my vehicle, Garrett said. His voice had gone quiet, controlled, the way men speak when they're describing the moment they should have died. I was standing in the turret, saw it coming, watched the smoke trail, knew exactly where it was going, knew I had maybe 2 seconds before impact, not enough time to move, Not enough time to do anything except understand that this was how it ended. Elle's hands were clenched at her sides, nails digging into her palms. She was 10 years old again, waiting for the casualty notification officers to knock on the door, watching her mother's face crumble when they arrived. Master Chief Robert Crawford was in the vehicle behind mine, Garrett said. 38 years old, 20 years in the Corps, 3 deployments, the most experienced NCO in our unit. The kind of Marine who younger guys looked to when things went sideways. The steady hand in chaos. Garrett's voice strengthened. He saw that RPG the same moment I did, saw where it was headed, and he made a decision. The kind of decision that defines what it means to be a Marine. The auditorium was silent. 200 people, barely breathing. Everyone who'd served in combat knew what was coming, knew the shape of sacrifice, the calculation that some lives were worth trading for others. Master Chief Crawford jumped from his vehicle, Garrett said, sprinted toward mine, reached me in the turret, grabbed me, threw me down behind the engine block, put his own body between me and that warhead. Garrett stopped, swallowed hard. The RPG hit him center mass, chest and shoulder. Shrapnel tore through him. He saved my life, took the hit that was meant for me, and I held him while he died because the medevac couldn't get to us. Too hot, too much fire. We were pinned down for 40 minutes. Elle's vision was blurring, tears she couldn't stop, couldn't control, her father dying in a city she'd never seen, bleeding out in the arms of a man she'd met just minutes ago. 40 minutes, long enough to know death was coming, long enough to be afraid. He was conscious, Garrett said, and his voice cracked. Conscious and in pain and bleeding out. And he didn't talk about himself. Didn't ask me to tell his wife he loved her. Didn't waste his last words on things she already knew. Garrett looked directly at Elle, held her eyes. He talked about his daughter, about Eleanor. He said, she's 10 years old, smart as hell, tougher than she knows. She's going to be something special. You tell her I'm proud. You tell her she can be anything. And then he looked at me and said, Garrett, you take care of her. You make sure she gets her chance. Promise me. The weight of those words settled over the room like a physical presence, a dying man's final request. The kind of promise that carried moral obligation beyond any regulation or protocol. I promised, Garrett said simply, I promised Master Chief Crawford that I would take care of his daughter. And then I failed him. For 9 years I failed him. Admiral Ashford's expression had transformed completely. The earlier skepticism was gone, replaced by understanding, by recognition of the debt that military service created, the obligations that extended beyond death. I searched everywhere, Garrett said, called every Marine I knew, checked every database. Eleanor's mother had remarried after Robert died, changed their last name, moved to a different state. The trail went cold. I couldn't find her, couldn't keep my promise. He paused, let the silence build. Until 2015, I was assigned here, San Diego. Walked into the base cafeteria for lunch. And there she was, 19 years old, serving food, her father's eyes staring back at me across a serving line. Elle remembered that moment with perfect clarity. The Admiral who'd stood too long staring at her face, who'd asked her name 3 times like he couldn't believe the answer, who'd walked away without taking food, leaving her confused and vaguely worried she'd done something wrong. I watched her for weeks, Garrett said, trying to figure out how to approach her, how to honor the promise without making it about obligation. And I saw something in her, saw her studying Navy regulations during breaks, reading intelligence manuals, learning about signals analysis. A 19-year-old cafeteria worker educating herself, preparing herself for something she didn't think she could actually achieve. Garrett's voice grew stronger, certain. She had a daughter, infant, raising her alone while working full-time. The father had left when he found out she was pregnant. Eleanor was living in a 1-bedroom apartment, working 50 hours a week, studying in every spare moment, trying to be a good mother and somehow still dreaming about serving her country. The room shifted, understanding settling in. This wasn't just a story about a fallen Marine. This was about legacy, about what happened when sacrifice echoed forward through generations. I made a phone call, Garrett said, called the Naval Academy, told them about Master Chief Crawford, about his sacrifice, about his daughter who wanted to serve but didn't have the academic foundation, who didn't think she was good enough, who needed someone to open the door. He looked at Elle. I arranged for a preparatory program, academic courses to fill the gaps in her education. I set up a scholarship, full ride, tuition, housing, books, everything. And I never told her who made it happen, never revealed myself, because I didn't want her feeling obligated, didn't want her succeeding because she owed me. I wanted her to earn it herself. Elle's hands were shaking. 9 years of wondering, 9 years of being grateful to an anonymous benefactor. And it was him, all along, the man her father saved, keeping his promise in the shadows. Eleanor Crawford entered the Naval Academy in 2017, Garrett said, and pride filled his voice. 21 years old, single mother, former cafeteria worker. Everyone told her she wouldn't make it. Too old, too many responsibilities, too far behind academically. Lieutenant Colonel Blake remembered her now, remembered the controversy when she'd been admitted, the whispers that she was a diversity admission, that standards had been lowered. He'd been one of the skeptics, one of the voices that doubted. She proved them wrong, Garrett said flatly. Every single one of them. She graduated in 2021, top of her class in intelligence warfare, fluent in Farsi and Pashto, expert in signals analysis and behavioral profiling. 4 years of people doubting her, and she answered with excellence. The applause started spontaneously, small at first, then building. Officers who understood how hard the academy was, how much harder for a student starting behind, for a single mother balancing coursework and parenting, for someone carrying the weight of proving she belonged. Elle sat with tears streaming down her face, not trying to hide them anymore. Her secret was out. Her struggle was public. And somehow, in Admiral Garrett's telling, it didn't feel shameful. It felt like strength. Garrett raised his hand. The applause quieted. After commissioning, Eleanor was assigned to intelligence training, proved herself again. Top marks, natural talent for pattern recognition and cultural analysis. The kind of officer you want analyzing threats, the kind who sees what others miss. He gestured to the ribbons on Elle's chest. That Bronze Star, earned in Afghanistan, 2023, intelligence operation that saved 35 American lives. That Purple Heart, earned taking shrapnel while protecting 2 wounded Marines during a Taliban rocket attack. Captain Crawford has bled for this country, has sacrificed for this country, has proven herself in ways that most officers never have to. The room erupted in applause, spontaneous, genuine. 200 people rising to their feet, officers who'd served in Iraq and Afghanistan understanding the weight of those medals, understanding what it meant to earn a Bronze Star, what it cost to receive a Purple Heart. Elle stood frozen, overwhelmed, the applause washing over her like a wave she couldn't fight. Admiral Garrett beside her, steady and certain. The father figure she'd never known she had. The keeper of promises, the guardian of her father's last request. Commander Sullivan stood near the stage, tablet forgotten in her hands, tears on her face. She understood now. Understood why Admiral Garrett had refused to sit, why this ceremony couldn't begin without Captain Crawford. This wasn't just a retirement. This was the honoring of a promise made 18 years ago on a battlefield in Iraq. This was a debt being publicly acknowledged, a legacy being passed forward. Garrett raised his hand. The applause quieted. The room settled back into seats, but the energy had changed. The confusion replaced by understanding, by respect. Commander Sullivan, Garrett said, his voice carrying absolute authority. "Please remove my name from that reserved seat in the front row. Put Captain Crawford's name there instead." Sullivan blinked. "Sir, that's your seat. You're the guest of honor." "Captain Crawford is senior to me in the ways that matter most," Garrett said. "She's the daughter of the man who saved my life. She's the embodiment of sacrifice and service. She's the reason I could continue serving for 18 more years after Fallujah. She belongs in that seat." "Sir, I can't." "That's an order, Commander." Sullivan nodded quickly, pulled out a pen, crossed off Garrett's name on her seating chart, wrote Captain Eleanor Crawford in its place. Garrett turned to Elle, took her gently by the arm. "Captain, you're sitting with me, front row." "Sir," Elle whispered, her voice breaking, "I'm not dressed right for this. I came straight from the intelligence center. I have coffee stains on my sleeve. This isn't appropriate protocol." "I don't care about coffee stains," Garrett said firmly. "I care about you being here. I care about honoring the promise I made to your father. I care about making sure every person in this room sees you, really sees you, understands who you are and what you represent." He guided her down the center aisle, 200 people watching their progress. Elle's legs moved automatically, following Garrett's lead because she didn't know what else to do. Her mind was spinning. Her emotions were everywhere. Pride and grief and gratitude and embarrassment all tangled together until she couldn't separate one from another. They reached the front row, the reserved seat, the place of honor. Garrett gestured for her to sit. Elle lowered herself into the chair, feeling like an imposter, feeling like someone was going to stand up and point out that she didn't belong, that cafeteria workers who got lucky didn't deserve front row seats at Admiral retirement ceremonies. But Garrett sat beside her, and his presence was an anchor, a declaration. She belonged because he said she belonged. And his word, backed by 3 stars and 36 years of service, was law in this room. The ceremony finally began. Commander Sullivan gave the opening remarks. The chaplain offered invocation. Captain Burton stepped to the podium to deliver his prepared speech about Admiral Garrett's distinguished career. But everyone in the room was distracted, stealing glances at the young captain in the front row, wondering about her story, about what she'd done to earn an admiral's loyalty, about how a cafeteria worker became a decorated naval intelligence officer. Elle sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, eyes forward, trying to process everything that had just happened. Her secret was out. Her past was public. The carefully constructed wall between who she'd been and who she'd become had just been demolished in front of 200 witnesses. And Admiral Garrett sat beside her, the man who'd kept his promise to her father, the man who'd changed her life without her knowing, the man who just used his own retirement ceremony to give her something she'd never asked for and didn't know how to accept. Recognition, validation, proof that she belonged. The ceremony continued around them, but for Elle, everything had already changed. She'd walked into this auditorium as Captain Eleanor Crawford, intelligence officer, someone who preferred to work in the background and avoid attention. She'd been pulled from shadows into light, made visible whether she wanted to be or not. And in the front row of a Navy auditorium, with 200 people watching and a 3-star admiral sitting beside her, Elle finally understood what her father's last words had meant. Take care of her, not protect her from the world, not shield her from challenge. Take care of her by making sure she had the chance to become everything she was capable of being. Admiral Garrett had kept that promise for 18 years, through searching and watching and orchestrating opportunities and standing beside her when it mattered most. Her father had saved Garrett's life in Fallujah, and Garrett had spent nearly 2 decades returning that favor by saving hers. The debt was paid. The promise was kept. And Eleanor Crawford, daughter of Master Chief Robert Crawford, sat in the seat of honor at a retirement ceremony that had become something much bigger than anyone expected. A ceremony that would change how 200 people saw her, how they understood her, how they judged what was possible. Part one of her new life had just begun, and there was no going back to invisibility now. Captain James Burton finished his remarks about Admiral Garrett's career. Good words, heartfelt. 36 years of service deserved recognition. But everyone in the auditorium was only half listening. Their attention kept drifting to the young captain in the front row, to the story Garrett had begun telling, to the mystery that remained unfinished. Burton seemed to sense it. He wrapped up his speech gracefully, yielded the podium, and returned to his seat on stage. The chaplain stood to offer closing benediction, standard ceremony protocol. Thank the attendees, dismiss them to reception, handshakes and small talk over coffee and sheet cake. But Admiral Garrett stood before the chaplain could speak. He walked to the podium. This wasn't on Commander Sullivan's program. She glanced down at her tablet, then back up at Garrett, confusion flickering across her face. The Admiral wasn't scheduled as a speaker. This was his retirement ceremony. He was supposed to receive honors, not deliver them. But he was a 3-star Admiral. Nobody was going to tell him to sit down. Garrett stood at the podium, hands gripping its edges. He looked out at 200 faces, officers who'd served under him, colleagues who'd fought beside him, junior personnel who knew him only by reputation. "You know how Master Chief Crawford died," Garrett said. "You know he saved my life. But you don't know what happened after. You don't know how his daughter became the officer sitting in that front row." He paused. Let the room settle into the next chapter. Eleanor's journey to the Naval Academy wasn't smooth. It was brutal. She was 21 when she started, older than her classmates. A single mother while they were fresh from high school. She'd spend 8 hours in class, then video call her daughter at bedtime, then study until 0300 because she was behind academically and couldn't afford to fail. Admiral Ashford leaned forward. She knew how demanding the academy was, knew what it took to survive 4 years there. Her roommate told me later, Garrett continued, that Eleanor slept 4 hours a night, every night, for 4 years, because she was working twice as hard to stay even with students who had better preparation, who didn't have a child depending on them, who could focus solely on academics. Lieutenant Colonel Blake sat 5 rows back, listening intently. He'd been an instructor during Elle's time, had watched her struggle, had assumed she'd wash out. And people doubted her, Garrett said, his voice taking on an edge. Faculty, fellow midshipmen, senior officers, they questioned whether she belonged, whether standards had been lowered, whether she was taking someone else's spot. Blake felt the words like a physical blow. He'd been one of those voices. But Eleanor didn't quit, Garrett said, because quitting would dishonor her father's sacrifice, would waste the opportunity he died to give her. So she endured, persevered, excelled. She didn't just graduate, she graduated top of her class in intelligence warfare. Fluent in 2 languages most of her classmates couldn't pronounce, expert in analysis techniques that took others years to master. The room was silent, understanding the cost of that achievement. After commissioning, Eleanor requested immediate deployment assignment, Garrett continued. Most new officers want stateside posts, time to adjust, learn their jobs in safe environments. Eleanor volunteered for Afghanistan, for the withdrawal operations, for the hardest, most dangerous intelligence work available. He looked at Lieutenant Colonel Blake. Colonel Blake argued against sending her, said she was too green, too inexperienced, that I was making a tactical error based on sentiment rather than capability. Blake wanted to sink into his seat, but he held Garrett's gaze, accepting the truth. I sent her anyway, Garrett said, because I knew something Colonel Blake didn't. I knew Eleanor Crawford had something most officers never develop. Not through training, not through experience, something innate. Garrett's voice strengthened. She had her father's gift, the ability to see what others miss, to recognize patterns in chaos, to trust her instincts when logic fails. Master Chief Crawford could walk into a room and identify threats before anyone else knew danger existed. His daughter inherited that gift. The room leaned forward. This was new information, details they hadn't heard. The Afghanistan mission wasn't just identifying infiltrators, Garrett said. It was psychological warfare. Eleanor was embedded with 40 Afghan soldiers. She was 27, female, junior. Everything about her screamed vulnerable target. He paused. The Taliban knew she was there, knew what she was looking for. They had agents in that unit feeding them information. They could have killed her at any time, could have eliminated the threat she represented. Elle sat perfectly still in the front row, remembering the fear, the awareness that death could come from any direction, the 36 hours of controlled terror. We had 48 hours, Garrett continued, 48 hours to identify Taliban infiltrators before a major joint operation. If we failed, if those agents compromised the mission, American casualties were guaranteed. 35 soldiers minimum, probably more. Lieutenant Colonel Blake's attention sharpened. He'd worked with Afghan forces, knew how difficult infiltrator identification was. How many Americans had died because someone they trusted turned out to be an enemy? My senior intelligence officers wanted aggressive interrogation, Garrett said. Separate suspects, pressure them, traditional methods, force and intimidation. Get answers fast because we didn't have time for subtlety. He looked at Elle with something like awe. Lieutenant Crawford said no. She wanted to observe, to watch, to listen, to use cultural intelligence and psychological analysis instead of aggression. She told me, "Sir, if we interrogate them, the real infiltrators will resist because they're trained. The innocent men will break because they're scared. We'll get confessions that mean nothing and miss the actual threats." Garrett's voice rose. So I gave her 36 hours. 36 hours to identify enemies hiding among allies, using nothing but observation and instinct, betting American lives on a 27-year-old officer's ability to see what others couldn't. The room was riveted. This was the story they'd been waiting for, the explanation of how a cafeteria worker earned a Bronze Star. Eleanor lived with those 40 Afghan soldiers, Garrett said, ate with them, slept in their barracks, watched how they moved, listened to how they spoke, observed who positioned themselves near communications equipment, who made religious observations differently, who claimed to be from provinces their dialect didn't match. He paused for effect. After 36 hours, she identified 3 Taliban infiltrators, not the obvious suspects, not the nervous ones, 3 deep-cover agents who'd been embedded for months, who'd passed every background check, who knew exactly how to blend in. The room was silent, waiting. How? Garrett asked rhetorically. Linguistic analysis. She's fluent in Pashto. 3 soldiers claimed to be from Kandahar, but use verb structures from Helmand province. Behavioral observation. Those same 3 men consistently position themselves to overhear American planning sessions. Cultural knowledge. They performed ablution prayers slightly differently than the regional standard, details invisible to anyone without her expertise. Lieutenant Colonel Blake felt sick. He'd argued against her, called her unqualified, and she'd done what he couldn't have done, what most intelligence officers with decades of experience couldn't have done. But Lieutenant Crawford didn't just identify the infiltrators, Garrett said. She turned 2 of them. The room erupted. Gasps, shocked whispers. This hadn't been in any official report. She recognized that 2 of the 3 were conscripts, Garrett continued, men forced into Taliban service, men whose families were being threatened. And instead of recommending immediate arrest, she offered them a choice. Garrett's voice filled with pride. Work for us. Feed disinformation back to Taliban commanders. Protect the operation from inside, or face military tribunal and execution for treason against their own country and collaboration with terrorists who'd killed their countrymen. He let that sink in. Both men took the deal. For 6 weeks, they fed false intelligence to Taliban leadership, misdirected ambush teams, provided early warning of attacks, saved American and Afghan lives not just through their exposure, but through their conversion to our side. Admiral Ashford's mouth was open. That level of field intelligence work was extraordinary. That required courage, cultural knowledge, and tactical genius that most officers never displayed even after full careers. That's why Lieutenant Crawford earned the Bronze Star with Valor device, Garrett said. Not just for identifying threats, for neutralizing them, for turning enemies into assets, for intelligence work that saved 35 American lives and probably double that number of Afghan allies, for operating alone in hostile territory with nothing but her wits and her father's gift for seeing what others missed. The applause was immediate, thunderous, 200 people on their feet, understanding that Captain Crawford wasn't just competent, she was exceptional, was operating at a level most intelligence officers never reached. Garrett let it run for 30 seconds, then raised his hand. The room quieted. People returned to seats, but the energy had fundamentally shifted. Skepticism had transformed into respect. Questions had become admiration. And then, Garrett said, his voice dropping, becoming harder, 72 hours after we arrested the third infiltrator and converted the other two, the Taliban retaliated. Elle's hands clenched in her lap. She knew this part, had tried to forget it, had nightmares about it still. Rocket attack on Lieutenant Crawford's forward operating base, Garrett said. 0300, 3 in the morning. The Taliban knew she was the one who'd identified their agents, knew where she was stationed, and they came for her specifically. The room held its breath. First rocket hit the building next to Lieutenant Crawford's quarters, Garrett continued. Second rocket hit her building directly, blew out the wall, brought down part of the roof. Lieutenant Crawford was concussed, cut by flying glass, should have evacuated immediately. He paused. In the room next to hers, 2 Marines were trapped, Corporal Michael Thompson and Lance Corporal David Martinez, both 20 years old, both bleeding, one with compound fracture, one with internal injuries from falling debris. Garrett's voice strengthened. Lieutenant Crawford heard them calling for help. Building was unstable, secondary collapses likely, fire spreading, ammunition cooking off in adjacent structures. Every protocol said evacuate, get clear, save yourself. Elle remembered the calculation, the voices crying for help, the decision that wasn't really a decision. Lieutenant Crawford went toward the voices, Garrett said, crawled through debris, found Thompson and Martinez, started pulling rubble off them, and while she was working, the third rocket hit. Same building. Secondary explosion from fuel storage igniting. The room was absolutely silent. Officers who'd been in combat understanding what that meant. Understanding the courage required to move toward danger instead of away from it. Lieutenant Crawford covered both Marines with her own body, Garrett said, his voice thick with emotion. Made herself the shield, took 14 shrapnel fragments in her back and right leg, kept herself over Thompson and Martinez until the explosions stopped, until help arrived, until both Marines were extracted alive. Tears were streaming down faces throughout the auditorium, people understanding the choice. The moment when self-preservation gave way to protecting others, when training became sacrifice. Thompson and Martinez survived, Garrett said. Minor injuries, both recovered fully, both still serving. Both write to Lieutenant Crawford every year on the anniversary to say thank you for choosing their lives over hers. He paused. Let the weight settle. For that action, Lieutenant Crawford received the Purple Heart. For wounds received in combat. For sacrifice. For living the principle that we take care of each other. Always. The standing ovation was immediate, spontaneous. 200 people on their feet, applause rolling through the auditorium like thunder. Admiral Ashford standing with tears on her face. Lieutenant Colonel Blake standing with his hand over his heart. His earlier skepticism transformed into reverence. Elle sat in the front row, overwhelmed. She'd never wanted recognition for that night, had done what anyone would have done, what she was trained to do, what her father would have done. The applause continued for 3 minutes. Garrett let it run, let the room process, let them understand who Eleanor Crawford was. Not charity, not luck, not favoritism, a warrior, proven in fire, blooded in combat, someone who'd earned every ribbon through sacrifice. Finally, Garrett raised his hand. The room settled. People returned to seats. But the way they looked at Elle had transformed. From curiosity to respect. From skepticism to recognition. Lieutenant Crawford was medevaced to Germany, Garrett continued. 4 months of recovery. 14 pieces of shrapnel removed, some too deep to extract safely. She carries them still. Fragments of Taliban rockets embedded in her back. Permanent reminders of the night she chose others over herself. He paused. I visited her at Landstuhl Medical Center, told her the truth about her father, about my promise, about watching her succeed, and she asked me a question. Garrett's voice dropped, became intimate. She asked, "Sir, was it worth it? Taking that shrapnel, the scars, the pain I'll carry forever. Was protecting Thompson and Martinez worth this?" The room leaned forward, waiting. I told her the truth, Garrett said. I told her that Thompson's mother still had a son, that Martinez's family wasn't planning a funeral, that 2 young men were alive because she'd made herself their shield, and that mathematics, that trade, is what service means. Not glory, not medals. The willingness to put others first when it costs you everything. Admiral Ashford nodded, understanding completely. That was the core of military service. Lieutenant Crawford returned to duty January 2024, Garrett said, promoted to lieutenant commander, then to captain in March, 28 years old, youngest female captain in naval intelligence. Not because of her father, not because of me, because she earned it through excellence and blood. He looked at Elle. And despite everything, despite medals and commendations and lives saved, she still faced doubt, still had senior officers questioning her qualifications, still had people saying she was my pet project, that her success was politics instead of performance. Admiral Ashford had the grace to look uncomfortable. She'd been one of those voices. 3 weeks ago, Garrett said, satisfaction in his tone, Captain Crawford broke a Chinese intelligence network. Agents operating on 3 West Coast naval installations, running for 18 months, undetected by everyone else, stealing classified submarine warfare data. The room stirred. That was significant. The kind of intelligence failure that ended careers. Captain Crawford identified the network through linguistic analysis, Garrett continued. Recognized Mandarin dialect patterns indicating military intelligence training. Tracked communications back to source. Built the case. 7 Chinese officers arrested. Entire operation dismantled. By a 28-year-old captain who sees what others miss. He stepped back from the podium, looked at Elle, extended his hand. Captain Crawford, join me up here. That's an order. Elle's heart stopped. No, too much, too public. She shook her head slightly. Captain, Garrett repeated, command in his voice. Elle stood on shaking legs, walked to the stage, climbed the steps, each one a mountain, stood beside Admiral Garrett, the man who'd kept his promise, the man who'd saved her life by giving her purpose. Garrett turned to the audience. For 9 years, I've watched this woman prove herself, prove that sacrifice and service aren't limited by background. That courage comes from unexpected places. That excellence can emerge from anywhere if given opportunity. He looked at Elle. Your father saved my life in Fallujah. I've spent 18 years returning that favor, opening doors, creating opportunities, making sure you had the chance to become everything he knew you could be. Garrett's voice broke slightly. Mission accomplished, Master Chief Crawford. Your daughter exceeded every expectation. She's a warrior, a leader, an officer who makes the Navy better by being part of it. The applause was deafening. Elle stood beside Garrett, tears streaming, finally understanding. This ceremony was never about his retirement. It was about honoring a promise made 18 years ago, about making her visible, about showing everyone who she was, because invisibility might feel safe, but it meant her father's sacrifice went unrecognized, meant the promise Garrett made went unfulfilled, and Admiral William Garrett never broke his promises. Admiral Garrett stood beside Elle on the stage, his hand resting on her shoulder. The applause from 200 people filled the auditorium. Elle wanted to run, wanted to escape back to her intelligence center where she analyzed threats from behind screens, where she was competent and confident and in control. But Garrett's hand was steady, anchoring her. She'd faced Taliban rockets and lived. She could face this. The applause faded. The room settled. Admiral Ashford sat in the front row, skepticism transformed. She'd served in Iraq, lost friends there, understood exactly what Master Chief Crawford's sacrifice meant. Garrett turned to face Elle directly. His voice dropped, meant for her but carried by the microphone. "Captain Crawford, I need to tell you something I should have told you years ago." Elle's breath caught. "There was more?" "This retirement ceremony," Garrett said slowly, deliberately, "isn't really what everyone thinks it is." Commander Sullivan looked confused. Captain Burton frowned. "This was Admiral Garrett's retirement. That was the whole point." "I'm not retiring because I'm tired," Garrett continued. "Not because I've served long enough. Not because it's time for younger officers." He paused. 200 people leaning forward. "I'm retiring because I accomplished my mission," Garrett said. "The mission I accepted 18 years ago when Master Chief Robert Crawford died in my arms. The mission to take care of his daughter." Elle's vision blurred. No, he couldn't retire because of her. "For 18 years, Garrett said, I interpreted that mission one way. Keep Eleanor safe. Give her opportunities. Protect her from obstacles. And I did that, anonymously, from shadows, making sure she had what she needed without revealing my hand." He faced the audience. "But 6 months ago, I realized I'd misunderstood Master Chief Crawford's request. He didn't ask me to protect Eleanor from the Navy. He asked me to protect her path in the Navy, to ensure his sacrifice didn't end with his death, that the Crawford legacy would continue." Admiral Ashford's eyes widened, understanding dawning. "And I realized," Garrett continued, "that the final step wasn't keeping her safe. It was making her visible, making sure everyone saw her, understood her, recognized what she'd accomplished." He looked at Elle. "You don't need my protection anymore, Captain. You've proven yourself beyond doubt. But you were still invisible, still working in background, still letting people walk past without seeing who you really are." Garrett's voice took on command tone. "So I'm using my retirement, my final act as Vice Admiral, to make you visible, to tell your story, to honor my promise to your father by ensuring everyone understands exactly who Captain Eleanor Crawford is." The weight settled over the auditorium. This entire ceremony had been orchestrated, not as goodbye for Garrett, but as introduction for Elle, as declaration that she belonged. "Master Chief Crawford," Garrett said, looking up, "if you're watching from wherever warriors go, I want you to know, mission accomplished. Your daughter exceeded every expectation, every hope, every dream." Tears streamed down Elle's face. Her father's last words, spoken through the man he'd saved, reaching across 18 years. Garrett turned to the audience. "But I'm not finished. I have one final order before I retire." He pulled an official envelope from his jacket, Navy seal embossed, the kind containing career-changing orders. "Captain Eleanor Crawford," Garrett said formally, "effective 1st December 2024, you are hereby promoted to Commander, United States Navy." The room erupted. Gasps, applause, shock. Commander at 28? That shattered every timeline, violated every unwritten rule about dues and turns. Elle's knees nearly buckled. Commander? She'd been captain for 8 months. This was impossible. Furthermore, Garrett continued, voice rising over commotion, you are assigned Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence Operations, Western Theater, effective immediately upon promotion. Silence. Stunned. Deputy Director? That position required 20-plus years, decades of experience, not 28-year-old captains commissioned 7 years ago. Admiral Ashford stood abruptly. Admiral Garrett, that position requires Senate confirmation. That needs proper channels. You can't just— I can, Garrett interrupted calmly. And I did. Confirmation hearing scheduled 15th November. 2 weeks. Armed Services Committee reviewed Captain Crawford's record. Her Bronze Star, her Purple Heart, her counterintelligence success. They've agreed to fast track. He looked at Ashford directly. Admiral, you question whether Captain Crawford's Bronze Star was earned or inflated, whether success was merit or favoritism. This assignment answers that. Senate doesn't confirm pet projects. They confirm qualified officers. Ashford's face reddened, but she sat. Because Garrett was right. Senate confirmation meant scrutiny, meant Crawford's record had been examined by people with no reason for favoritism. Lieutenant Colonel Blake stood. His voice carried. Admiral Garrett, sir. I owe Captain Crawford an apology. I doubted her, argued against her Afghanistan assignment, called her unqualified. I was wrong about everything. He faced Elle. Ma'am, you saved 35 American lives through work I couldn't have done. You took shrapnel protecting Marines when you could have saved yourself. You deserve this promotion. You've earned it. Blake's admission broke something open. Other officers stood, offering recognition, acknowledging they'd underestimated her, judged background instead of performance. Lieutenant Marcus Reed stood. Ma'am, I've eaten in the cafeteria where you worked. Walked past that line 100 times. Never saw you. Never recognized someone serving food could become someone who saves lives. You've changed how I see service. Changed what I think possible. Female Ensign Julia Hartford stood. 23, fresh from academy. Commander Crawford, you're why I chose intelligence. You proved women can excel here, that we don't need to be twice as good for half recognition. You've opened doors for all of us. Testimonials continued, officer after officer, sharing how Elle's story impacted them, changed them, made them reconsider assumptions about who belonged. Elle stood on stage, overwhelmed. She'd spent years trying to be invisible. Let work speak for itself. Avoid attention. And here she was, center of everything, while 200 people told her they saw her. Garrett let it continue several minutes. Let the moment build. Let Elle absorb recognition. Then he raised his hand. The room quieted. Captain Crawford, he said, voice gentle now, paternal. You told me once you didn't deserve opportunities you received, that you were just a cafeteria worker who got lucky, that someone more qualified should have gotten your academy slot. Elle remembered. 3 years ago, after Bronze Star, struggling with imposter syndrome, feeling like she'd stolen someone's chance. I need you to understand something, Garrett continued. Master Chief Crawford didn't save my life so I could give his daughter charity. He saved my life because that's who he was, a warrior who protected others, put his body between danger and people he served with. And that's exactly who you are. He pulled something from his pocket, small velvet box, opened it. Inside was a medal, silver star on blue ribbon with white stars. The Silver Star, one of highest decorations for valor. This was your father's, Garrett said quietly. His Silver Star. Earned Iraq, 2004. Different deployment than when he saved me. He earned this during Second Battle of Fallujah, leading his squad through building clearing. Took out 3 insurgent positions. Saved his entire squad. Elle's breath caught. She'd never seen her father's Silver Star. Her mother had kept his medals in a box. Elle, too young to understand their significance. By the time she was old enough to ask, her mother had packed them away. Too painful. "Your mother gave this to me," Garrett said. "Last week. When I told her what I was planning today, she wanted you to have it, wanted you to know courage runs in your blood, that you're not lucky. You're a warrior, just like your father." He pinned the silver star on Elle's uniform, right above her own bronze star and purple heart. Father's medal beside daughter's. Legacy made visible. "Master Chief Robert Crawford was the finest Marine I ever knew," Garrett said, voice thick with emotion. "And Commander Eleanor Crawford is carrying forward his legacy in ways that would make him proud beyond measure." Standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. 200 people on feet. Applause mixed with tears. Officers who'd served with Robert Crawford. Young sailors who'd never met him but understood sacrifice. Family members who recognized weight of military legacy. Elle stood with her father's silver star pinned to her chest. The medal felt heavy, significant, like his hand on her shoulder, like his voice telling her he was proud, like 18 years of grief and longing and trying to be worthy had finally been recognized. Garrett pulled her into embrace. Not military protocol, not proper for public ceremony. But nobody cared. This wasn't about protocol. This was about family, about promises kept, about love expressed through action across 18 years. "Thank you," Elle whispered against his shoulder. "Thank you for keeping your promise to my father. Thank you for giving me chance to serve. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible." "You were never invisible to me," Garrett whispered back. "Never. I saw Robert Crawford's daughter from first moment. Saw your father's courage, your father's strength, your father's heart. And I watched you become everything he knew you could be." They separated, stood together on stage, the Admiral and the Commander, the keeper of promises and inheritor of legacy. Two people bound by sacrifice that happened on a street in Fallujah 18 years ago. Commander Sullivan approached. Professional composure cracked. Tears streaked her face. "Sir, reception is ready, but everyone would understand if you wanted more time." Garrett nodded. "Thank you, Commander, but we should proceed. People came to celebrate. Let's give them something to celebrate." Ceremony concluded with benediction. Formal remarks about service and sacrifice and bonds military life created. Words that felt more significant now, more weighted because everyone understood the story beneath them. Reception was held in Base Officers Club. Tables with white linens, coffee and cake, traditional elements, but atmosphere was transformed. This wasn't just goodbye to retiring Admiral. This was recognition of something bigger, promise fulfilled, legacy honored. Elle stood beside Garrett, shaking hands, receiving congratulations. Officers she'd never met telling her they were honored to serve with her. Young sailors asking advice. Female officers thanking her for proving what was possible. Admiral Ashford approached. 54, silver hair, 2 stars. She'd been one of Elle's harshest critics. Questioned qualifications. Suggested promotions were political. "Commander Crawford," Ashford said formally. Then composure cracked. "I owe you an apology. I questioned your bronze star, suggested it was inflated, said your success was about Admiral Garrett's favoritism rather than performance." Elle started to respond, but Ashford raised hand. "Let me finish. I was wrong, completely wrong. I let my own biases, my assumptions about how careers should progress, blind me to your actual performance. You've earned everything through sacrifice and skill. I'm ashamed I didn't see it." She extended hand. "I'm honored to serve with you, Commander, and grateful officers like you are leading next generation." Elle took her hand. "Thank you, Admiral. That means more than you know." "Your father would be proud," Ashford said quietly. "Master Chief Crawford was legendary. I served Iraq, different unit, but I knew his reputation. Warriors like him are rare. Warriors like you are rarer still. You've honored his legacy in best way possible. Other senior officers approached, offering similar sentiments, acknowledging earlier skepticism, recognizing failure to see past background to performance. Lieutenant Colonel Blake waited until crowd thinned, approached with visible nervousness. Ma'am, I need to apologize, not just for doubting you in Afghanistan, for Academy too. I was instructor when you were admitted. I was one of the voices saying you didn't belong, that you'd wash out, that accepting you was lowering standards. He looked down, ashamed. I watched you struggle that first year, saw you working triple hours of other students, saw you balancing being mother with being midshipman. And I told myself I was right, that you were barely hanging on, that you'd quit eventually. Blake's voice strengthened. Then you graduated, top of class, proved working harder was working smarter, that your experience as mother, as someone who'd struggled, gave you perspective other students didn't have, made you better, not worse. And I realized I'd been wrong about everything. He met her eyes. Afghanistan confirmed it. You did intelligence work I couldn't have done. Officers with decades of experience couldn't have done. You saved lives through skills I didn't recognize you had. Then you took shrapnel protecting Marines when you should have saved yourself. Blake's voice cracked. Ma'am, you're everything an officer should be. Everything I tried to teach and failed to recognize when I saw it. Thank you for proving me wrong. Thank you for being better than my low expectations. Elle felt tears threatening. Colonel Blake, you taught me tactical analysis. Your classes were some of the hardest I took, but they prepared me for Afghanistan. PED prepared me to recognize patterns and identify threats. You contributed to my success, even if you didn't believe in me at the time. Blake's eyes widened. Ma'am, I don't deserve credit for... You taught me well, Elle interrupted firmly, and I learned from you, both from your instruction and from your skepticism. You taught me I'd have to prove myself over and over, that excellence wasn't enough, that I needed to be undeniable. That lesson served me well. Blake nodded slowly. Then I'm grateful my doubt pushed you to excellence, ma'am, even though I wish I'd recognized your potential from start. Young officers surrounded Elle as Blake departed. Ensigns and lieutenants who saw her as proof unconventional paths could lead to success. That background didn't determine destiny. That Navy valued performance over pedigree. Young female lieutenant approached. Sarah Bromley, 25, intelligence analyst. Ma'am, can I ask something personal? Elle nodded. Of course. How did you handle everyone doubting you? Bromley's voice was quiet, intense. How did you keep going when people said you didn't belong? When they questioned every success? When they assumed you were charity instead of competent? Elle was quiet, considering. I didn't prove them wrong, she said finally. I proved my father right. Bromley frowned, confused. My father believed I could serve, Elle explained. He told Admiral Garrett I was smart, tough, that I could be anything. He believed that when I was 10. Before I had evidence to support it, before I'd done anything to earn that faith. She touched Silver Star on her chest. Every time someone doubted me, I remembered my father never did. He believed in me when belief was all he had. When he was dying and had no reason to lie or comfort with false hope. He believed. So I worked to prove him right. Not prove doubters wrong, but honor his faith in me. Bromley's eyes were wet. That's beautiful, ma'am. It's survival, Elle said honestly. Trying to prove skeptics wrong is exhausting. Never ends. There's always another doubter, another person who questions you. But proving someone who believed in you right? That's sustainable. That's fuel that doesn't run out. Several young officers had gathered, listening, absorbing wisdom from someone who'd walked the path they were navigating. My father died protecting others, Elle continued. Admiral Garrett spent 18 years keeping promise to dying Marine. I've tried to honor both by serving with integrity, being competent, protecting people I serve with. That's not about proving anything to anyone. That's about being worthy of faith they had in me. Male ensign spoke. Ma'am, what about your daughter? How did you balance being mother with academy, with deployments? Elle smiled. Poorly sometimes. My mother helped immensely. Raised my daughter while I was at academy, while I deployed. I missed years of her childhood. Missed first steps and first words in school plays. Smile faded. That's the cost. Sacrifice that doesn't make it into medal citations. My daughter is 9. She doesn't fully understand why her mother was gone so much. Why video calls replaced bedtime stories. Why duty came before her recitals. Elle's voice strengthened. But I hope she'll understand someday. Understand I served so she could grow up safe. That I sacrificed time with her so other mothers didn't lose children to threats I helped prevent. That service means something, costs something, requires something. Young officers were silent, processing reality that excellence had price. Success required sacrifice. Nothing worth doing came easy. Garrett approached as crowd around Elle thinned. Commander, there's someone here who wants to meet you. He gestured to a woman near entrance. 62, gray hair, civilian clothes, but she stood like military, straight-backed, alert, bearing that never fully left people who'd served. Elle's breath caught. Mom? Her mother, Catherine Crawford, walked across room. Elle hadn't known she was coming. They'd spoken 2 days ago, but her mother said she couldn't make it. Work obligations, prior commitments. Catherine reached Elle and pulled her into fierce embrace. Your father would be so proud, she whispered, so incredibly proud. Elle broke. Composure she'd maintained through ceremony, through reception, through weight of recognition, shattered. She sobbed against her mother's shoulder. 18 years of grief and striving and trying to be worthy finally released. He saved Admiral Garrett, Catherine said quietly, and Garrett saved you. Gave you opportunities Robert and I could never provide. Made sure our daughter had chance to serve like her father, to honor his legacy, to carry forward his courage. She pulled back, looked at Silver Star on Elle's chest, touched it with shaking fingers. That's his Silver Star from Fallujah. I've kept it in box for 18 years. Couldn't look at it, couldn't touch it without remembering him dying. But Admiral Garrett asked me for it, told me what he was planning, asked if you could have it. Catherine's voice broke. I said yes, because Robert would want you wearing it, would want his courage protecting his daughter, would want you carrying his legacy forward. Elle looked at her mother, saw grief that 18 years hadn't healed, saw pride mixed with sorrow, saw love that sustained her through single parenthood and remarriage, and watching daughter follow same path that killed her husband. I'm sorry, Elle whispered. Sorry for choosing military service. Sorry for putting you through worry. Sorry for making you relive Dad's deployments every time I deployed. Catherine shook head firmly. Don't apologize for being your father's daughter. Don't apologize for having his courage, his sense of duty, his willingness to serve. Those are gifts, Eleanor. Gifts he gave you through his example. Gifts you've honored through your service. She touched Elle's face. You're a mother now. You understand the fear, the worry, the constant awareness your child might not come home. That's price military families pay. Sacrifice that extends beyond person wearing uniform. Catherine's voice strengthened. But you're also proving something important. Proving women can serve, can excel, can lead. Your daughter is watching you, learning from you, understanding women can be warriors, can protect others, can make difference. Elle thought of her daughter, 9 years old, growing up with mother who deployed, who missed birthdays and holidays, who video called from war zones and came home with scars. Does she understand? Elle asked quietly. Does she know why I'm gone so much? Catherine smiled. She knows her mother is important, knows you serve your country, knows you protect people. She's proud of you. Even when she misses you, even when she wishes you were home, she's proud. I want to be there for her more, Elle said. Want to be mother she deserves. But this promotion, this assignment, it's going to mean more responsibility, more time away, more sacrifice. Then bring her to your promotion ceremony, Catherine said firmly. Let her see you pinning on commander rank. Let her understand what you've accomplished, what you've earned. Let her be part of it instead of watching from distance. Elle nodded. Her daughter deserved to see this, deserved to understand her mother's absence had purpose, had meaning, had value beyond just duty. Garrett rejoined them. Mrs. Crawford, thank you for coming, for trusting me with Robert's Silver Star, for allowing me to tell Eleanor's story. Catherine took his hand, held it in both of hers. Admiral, you kept your promise to my husband. For 18 years you've taken care of our daughter, given her opportunities, supported her, made sure she had chance to become everything Robert believed she could be. Her voice cracked. You gave me my husband's dying wish. You made sure Eleanor could serve, could honor her father, could carry forward his legacy. I'm grateful beyond words. Garrett's eyes were wet. Robert Crawford saved my life, gave me 36 more years of service, gave me chance to have family, to build career, to make difference. Least I could do was honor his final request. He looked at Elle, and she made it easy, made it privilege. Watching Eleanor succeed has been greatest honor of my career, greater than any medal, any promotion, any command, because I got to watch Robert Crawford's daughter become the officer he always knew she could be. Three of them stood together, bound by sacrifice, by promise, by love that transcended death and distance in 18 years of grief. Family not of blood, but of duty, of honor, of commitment to each other. Reception continued around them, officers sharing stories, sailors enjoying cake, normal rhythm of retirement ceremony. But for Elle, everything had changed. She wasn't invisible anymore, wasn't unknown, wasn't just another intelligence officer trying to prove herself. She was Commander Eleanor Crawford, daughter of Master Chief Robert Crawford, protege of Admiral William Garrett, Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence Operations, decorated combat veteran, single mother, warrior, all of it visible now, all of it acknowledged, all of it honored. Weight was enormous, responsibility crushing, expectations impossible. But Elle had carried impossible weight before, had survived crushing pressure, had exceeded expectations designed to break her. She could do this, would do this, because her father had believed she could, because Admiral Garrett had invested 18 years making sure she had chance, because Marines named Thompson and Martinez were alive because she'd shielded them, because 35 American soldiers came home from Afghanistan because she'd identified infiltrators, because service mattered, sacrifice meant something. And legacy wasn't about comfort or recognition or avoiding hard things. Legacy was about making choice to protect others, to honor promises, to carry forward courage of people who came before. Master Chief Robert Crawford had made that choice in Fallujah, had put his body between danger and officer beside him, had died protecting someone else's future. Admiral William Garrett had made that choice for 18 years, had protected Eleanor's path, had made sure she had opportunities, had kept promise to dying Marine. Now it was Commander Eleanor Crawford's turn, her turn to protect, to serve, to honor legacy she'd inherited, to make choices that put others first, to be worthy of her father's faith in Garrett's investment. Reception wound down, officers departed, room emptied. Elle stood with Garrett and her mother, last three people remaining. What happens now? Elle asked quietly. Garrett smiled. Now you lead, Commander. You take position you've earned. You serve with honor. You protect people under your command. You make decisions that save lives. You carry forward everything your father taught you and everything I tried to teach you. He paused. And you remember you're not alone, that you have people who believe in you, who support you, who will be there when things get hard, because they will get hard. Command always is. I'm scared, Elle admitted. Scared I'm not ready. Scared I'll fail. Scared I'll let down everyone who believes in me. Good, Garrett said firmly. Fear means you understand responsibility, means you care about people you'll lead, means you won't take position for granted. Fear is healthy. Use it. Don't let it use you. Catherine squeezed Elle's hand. Your father was scared too. Every deployment, every mission, every time he put on his uniform. But he went anyway. Because duty mattered more than fear. Because protecting others mattered more than comfort. You have his courage, Eleanor. His strength, his heart. Trust that. Elle nodded, took deep breath, straightened shoulders, felt weight of her father's silver star on chest. Felt Garrett's steady presence beside her. Felt mother's love supporting her. She could do this, would do this, because she was Master Chief Robert Crawford's daughter, because she was Admiral William Garrett's protege, because she was Commander Eleanor Crawford, United States Navy, and she'd earned her place through sacrifice and skill and 18 years of proving she belonged. Invisible Warrior was invisible no more, and legacy of courage that began in Fallujah would continue in San Diego, would continue in every decision she made, every life she protected, every junior officer she mentored. Service never ended, it just changed shape. And Commander Eleanor Crawford was ready for whatever came next, because she'd learned from the best, from father who died protecting others, from mentor who kept promises, from mother who sacrificed her own peace so daughter could serve. And she would honor them all by leading with integrity, by protecting her people, by making hard choices, by being worthy of faith they'd placed in her. Auditorium lights dimmed as facility manager prepared to close. Elle walked out with Garrett and her mother, into California afternoon, into future she'd earned, into life her father had died believing she could have. And somewhere, in whatever place warriors go when they fall, Master Chief Robert Crawford smiled. Because his daughter had become everything he'd known she could be. Because promise had been kept. Because legacy continued. And that was all any warrior could ask for. That their sacrifice mattered. That their service had meaning. That their children carried forward their courage into whatever battles came next. Mission accomplished. Promise kept. Legacy honored. Silent Warrior was silent no more, and her story had only just begun. 2 weeks later, Elle stood in a different auditorium, smaller, more intimate. Naval Intelligence Western Command headquarters. Her daughter sat front row beside Catherine, 9 years old, wearing blue dress, watching mother with wide eyes. Admiral Garrett was there, civilian clothes now, retired officially as of last Friday, but wearing his decorations, silver hair gleaming, standing with dignitaries who'd come to witness Commander Eleanor Crawford's official assumption of duty. Senator Patricia Warren from Armed Services Committee stepped to podium. 70 years old, sharp, Navy veteran herself from 1970s. She'd presided over Elle's confirmation hearing. Commander Crawford's confirmation was one of the most straightforward I've seen in 20 years, Warren said. Her service record speaks for itself. Bronze Star, Purple Heart, counterintelligence successes that saved American lives and protected national security. She is precisely caliber of officer we need leading intelligence operations. Elle stood at attention, wearing dress whites, her father's silver star positioned above her own medals, visible reminder of legacy. There were questions during confirmation, Warren continued, questions about her age, her rapid promotion, whether she was ready for this level of responsibility. I asked Commander Crawford directly, are you prepared to lead officers with decades more experience than you? Senator smiled. She said, Senator, I'm prepared to learn from officers with decades more experience than me. And I'm prepared to bring fresh perspective to threats decades of experience might miss. Leadership isn't about knowing everything. It's about knowing how to use everyone. Warren gestured to Elle. That answer convinced me. She understands what leadership actually means. Not authority, service. Not commanding, enabling. Commander Crawford will make Navy intelligence community better by being part of it. Promotion ceremony was brief. Admiral Ashford stepped forward to pin on Elle's commander insignia. Gesture of respect, of acknowledgement, of public support from senior officer who'd once doubted her. "Welcome to team, Commander," Ashford whispered as she affixed rank. "Make us proud." Elle looked at her daughter in front row, saw her watching with pride, in confusion, in beginning of understanding. Saw her mother beside her, tears streaming, 22 years of military widowhood reflected in her face. "I promise," Elle whispered back. After ceremony, Elle's daughter approached shyly. "Mommy, why does everyone keep calling you Commander?" Elle knelt down, eye level. "Because that's my rank now, sweetheart. It means I'm responsible for protecting our country, for keeping people safe." "Like Grandpa did?" Elle's throat tightened. Her daughter had never met Robert Crawford, knew him only through photos and stories. Exactly like Grandpa did. Her daughter touched Silver Star on Elle's chest. "Is this his?" "Yes, this was your grandfather's. He earned it being brave, protecting his Marines. And now I wear it to remember him, to honor him." "Are you brave like him?" Elle thought about Afghanistan, about shielding Thompson and Martinez, about 36 hours embedded with potentially hostile forces, about every moment she'd chosen duty over safety. "I try to be," Elle said honestly. "Sometimes I'm scared, but I do my job anyway. That's what brave means. Not being unafraid, being afraid and doing what needs to be done anyway." Her daughter nodded solemnly. 9 years old, processing concepts most adults struggled with. "I'm proud of you, Mommy," she said quietly. "Even when I miss you, even when you're gone, I'm proud." Elle pulled her into hug, held her tight. This was cost no medal recognized, sacrifice no ceremony honored, price paid in missed moments, in video calls, in explaining why duty mattered more than presence. But also the reason she served, so her daughter could grow up safe, could become anything she wanted, could live in country protected by people willing to pay price. Admiral Garrett approached as Elle's daughter ran back to Catherine. "Your father would have loved to see this," he said quietly, "would have burst with pride." "He's here," Elle said, touching Silver Star. "I feel him. Every decision, every challenge. His voice asking, 'Are you protecting your people? Are you leading with honor?' He's here." Garrett nodded. "Good, because work ahead is harder than anything you've done. You'll make decisions that cost lives. You'll balance intelligence needs against moral imperatives. You'll face threats you can't discuss with anyone. Command at this level is lonely, brutal, unforgiving." "I know," Elle said, "but you're not alone," Garrett continued. "You have mentors, colleagues, people who believe in you. Use them. Lean on them. Don't try to carry everything yourself." Elle looked at him. Man who'd kept promise for 18 years, who'd guided her path without controlling it, who'd made her visible when invisibility felt safer. "Thank you," she said, "for everything, for finding me, for opening doors, for making me prove myself, for believing I could when I didn't believe myself." Garrett smiled. "Thank Robert. He's the one who saved me, who gave me chance to serve, who asked me to take care of you. I just kept promise." "You did more than that," Elle said firmly. "You gave me future, purpose, way to honor my father. You changed my life." "No," Garrett said gently, "you changed your life. I just made sure you had opportunity. You did work, earned rank, proved you belonged. That's all you, Commander. Never forget that." 5 years later, 2029, Commander Eleanor Crawford stood at her desk, 33 years old now, 5 years as deputy director, hair pulled back in regulation bun, reading glasses perched on nose, office walls covered with photos. Master Chief Robert Crawford in Marine dress blues. Young, proud, forever 38. Admiral Garrett at his retirement ceremony. Silver hair, 3 stars gleaming. Day everything changed. Thompson and Martinez in Afghanistan. Both Marines healed and whole. Both serving still. Both writing her every year on anniversary of rocket attack to say thank you. Her daughter at 14, growing tall, strong, considering military service herself, understanding now why her mother chose duty, why sacrifice mattered, why service meant something. And new photo, fresh from last month. Sarah Bromley, young lieutenant who'd asked how to handle doubt, now captain herself, leading her own intelligence team. Writing an thank you note, "You showed me path, I'm following it, teaching others way you taught me." Elle's office door opened. Admiral Victoria Ashford entered. 3 stars now, promoted 2 years ago. "Commander, we have situation. Chinese intelligence network operating in Pearl Harbor. Sophisticated, embedded deep. We need your best analyst on it." Elle nodded, pulled up personnel files, scanned capabilities, identified right officer for mission. "Captain Marcus Reed. He's ready. Send him." Ashford smiled. "Reed's good, but he learned from best. You trained half analysts in this command. They're all carrying forward your methods, your instincts, your approach to intelligence." "I just taught them what my father taught me," Elle said. "See what others miss. Trust your gut. Protect your people. Everything else is details." Ashford turned to leave, then paused. "Your father would be proud, you know." Master Chief Crawford's legacy isn't just his silver star. It's you, and every officer you've trained, and every American life they save using skills you taught them. Elle looked at her father's photo. 22 years since Fallujah. 22 years of carrying his courage forward. 22 years of trying to be worthy of his sacrifice. "I hope so," Elle said quietly. "I hope he knows I tried, that I served with honor, that I protected others way he protected Admiral Garrett, that his death meant something, changed something, started something that's still growing." Ashford left. Elle returned to work. Reports to review, threats to assess, officers to mentor. Endless cycle of service that defined her life. Her phone buzzed. Text from her daughter. "Mom, I applied to Naval Academy today. Used your recommendation letter. Wish me luck. Love you." Elle stared at message. Her daughter. Choosing service. Choosing sacrifice. Following path Robert Crawford had walked. That Eleanor Crawford had walked. That generations of warriors had walked. Pride and terror in equal measure. She typed back, "You'll be amazing. Your grandfather would be so proud. I'm proud. Love you more than you know." Then she stood, walked to window, looked out at San Diego Harbor, ships at dock, sailors working, machinery of national defense turning day after day after day. Master Chief Robert Crawford had died protecting one officer. That officer had protected one cafeteria worker's future. That cafeteria worker had become officer who'd saved 35 Americans, who'd trained hundreds of analysts, who'd broken spy networks and prevented attacks and made countries safer in ways no one would ever fully know. And now her daughter was joining fight, carrying forward legacy, proving service wasn't just duty, it was calling. Heritage, honor passed from generation to generation. Silent warrior wasn't silent anymore, wasn't invisible, wasn't unknown. She was Commander Eleanor Crawford, and she'd spent 13 years proving courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about serving anyway, about protecting others, about honoring warriors who came before, by becoming warrior worthy of standing beside them. Her father had died in Fallujah, Admiral Garrett had retired in San Diego, and Eleanor Crawford continued serving, would continue serving, until her time came to pass legacy forward to next generation. Because that's what warriors did. They served, they sacrificed, they protected. And when their watch ended, they passed responsibility to warriors coming behind them. Cycle never ended, mission never finished, duty never stopped. And Commander Eleanor Crawford wouldn't have it any other way. Mission accomplished, Dad. Your daughter kept fighting, kept serving, kept protecting, and I'll keep going. For you, for Admiral Garrett, for Thompson and Martinez, for every American who sleeps safely because warriors stand watch. For my daughter, who'll stand watch after me, legacy continues forever.